So, well, I'm going to sort of rush through the slides. There's a lot of information here. I believe the slides will be made available, right, for you interested in the details. I'll try to give you an idea on the populations, territories, languages, the language endangerment situation, documentation projects, bilingual education, the Constitution 1988, which is a beautiful document, modern, progressive document, and the current threats. We are right now in Brazil undergoing a coup of state, which is trying to reverse much of the advancements that have been reached in the last 20 years at least, since the Constitution. So there's nothing else going on in Brazil right now than denouncing and trying to get organized in order to prevent the attempts of really occupying indigenous lands, and they are almost finishing with the Indigenous Foundation, the FUNAI, which is responsible for education in some aspects and also health and demarcation of land. All of this is under threat right now in Brazil. So if you compare the indigenous people in Latin America, Brazil is like 0.5% of the population, about 900,000 people. If you compare, for example, with Bolivia, which is 62% of the population, even Peru, 24%, it's just 0.5% of the population. However, it's the highest number of indigenous peoples, 305 indigenous people. So, so the last census, the Brazilian Geography and Statistics Institute. So we have the Brazilian population 2010 was about almost to 200 million, and then indigenous population almost 900,000. So the distribution, about 60% actually live in indigenous lands, and 36% in urban areas, 7% in rural areas. And then the ethnic groups varies a bit. For the Institute, the official statistics, 305 ethnic groups, but other NGOs have estimated there are less than that in the 250 indigenous lands. According to languages also, I mean, the official institute says 274, but linguists nowadays are more either between 150 and 180 languages still alive in Brazil. So this is the situation of Brazil in the 1500s when the Portuguese colonizers first arrived. So if you see the Carib, Tupi, Arawak, Macro-G languages, about 1,000 group denominations, probably around 600 languages were spoken in Brazil by 1500 before the colonization. And now if you see what happens, it's a much less colorful map, but we still have 0.5% of the population. These are the lands. The problem which is being faced right now is that even though it's 0.5% of the population, they get between 12 to 13% of the area of the country. Now, what happens is that if you see, like, this is the state, one of the largest states in Brazil, the state of Mato Grosso, which is, in Portuguese, Mato Grosso means in English, dense forest, thick forest. However, nowadays, Mato Grosso is not so dense in terms of forest anymore. You see the areas which are green, because this is the Xingu area, one of the major reservations. This is also indigenous area, Nambiquara, Cinta Larga, and other groups. This is all soybean plantations. So this is being devastated very quickly. And the International Labour Organization, Brazil is a signatory of this treaty, and they recognize that actually the regions, the forests managed by indigenous people had near zero deforestation. Forests outside the protected area had much higher deforestation, 27 more carbon dioxide emissions. So it's another aspect of this struggle that we're going through right now. Also, the International Labour Organization report that actually these are key successful policies combating climate changing in Brazil by preserving these areas, and right now they are under attack. Agribusiness, miners, loggers, they are all coveting the possession of this 13% of Brazilian territory, which is under the control of indigenous societies. So we have about 160 indigenous languages in Brazil, 2 micro families, the Tupian stock and the Micro G stock. Micro G is a group of languages which has never been found elsewhere outside Brazil. 40 families, 10 isolated languages which have not been classified in any of the major families. Basically, the average 250 to 270 speakers per language in average. Isolated is still in the south of Amazon area, southwest Amazon area. These are recent pictures. You probably have seen pictures like this in the media, have been spotted. About 20 groups have been confirmed that we don't know which language, if it belongs to one of the main families or different types of languages, all under threat right now. The State Indigenous Foundation had cuts of 40% in their budget. The president has just resigned because he is resisting to comply with what the power to be now they want them to do, and they're doing it very fast. They're changing the legislation very fast. They want to have the control of the demarcation of indigenous lands for the Congress, and most of the Congress is controlled by agribusiness representatives, and they're doing things overnight. They're changing. There is a constitutional amendment right now. They're trying to pass it, in which they transfer all the regulations to the Congress. And anyway, so we have, this is a demographic distribution. You see about only 50% of these languages have over 1,000 speakers, right? Half of the languages have less than 250 speakers. And this is, if you compare this pie, the tiny fraction there is not even the indigenous languages, other languages which are not Portuguese. So very minority. So this is Japanese, which is basically the second language of Brazil. The only place in which there are more Japanese speakers outside Brazil is Japan in itself, and the second is Japanese in the south. Then we have other languages such as Polish, Russian, German, Pomeranian, and other languages which came to Brazil and is still spoken there. And these are the indigenous languages here, which is about, let's say, 25% of the tiny fraction. However, they're very diverse. These are several families, the Tupian in yellow, and then you have, this is the Micro G, which are only in Brazil, but also Carib, Arawa, Tucano, Pano, and some isolated languages like Ticuna and others. So very diverse, and of course they all endangered. 21% of these languages in immediate danger because of sheer small numbers of speakers and low transmission rate. 13 of these languages have some complete descriptions, 40% have advanced descriptions, 30% have incipient description, like a master thesis, for example, and about 20% have no scientific description. Some programs, documentation programs, have been happening in Brazil. For example, have projects for all these languages. It's the ProDocLink project, and the project documenting cultural aspects as well, so representing in the map. And bilingual education, because of the Constitution, and, which is very modern in 1988. There was this agency, SECADIF, which has been extinct in the past few months, and they had implementing specific differentiated bilingual and intercultural programs. So this was very successful. Many people, indigenous peoples, were organized higher education programs because the dropout rate was very high in the regular programs at the universities in Brazil, throughout Brazil. But so they had specific differentiated programs with the help of academia, NGOs, and the state foundations, and also from grassroots movements, indigenous organizations. So we had this data here. Pedagogical materials, we had a program of pedagogical grammars also, which have been developed with the active participation of indigenous representatives. We studied, went to university, learned some linguistics, and they learned about the laws, and now they want the laws to be implemented. So tiny, the federal constitution is a beautiful document. You have all those, like in Peru, and probably like here too. And that's all recognized. And they could, the major turn in 1988, abandon the assimilation perspective. Okay? Indigenous is not a transitional category, and they have the right to remain indigenous. They have their lands, the right prior to the creation of the state in itself. That's in the Constitution. And the indigenous studied the Constitution at universities, at the university program, the past 20 years, since the year 2000. And they now want it to be followed, to be actually implemented. So they're very visible, even though they are just 0.5% of the population, we're spread in a huge country. They're very visible, and they have been able to denounce and make their claims presented in different forums, different places. And we have now, this the former president of FUNAI that has been sacked amid land conflicts. That's the situation we're living right now. And you see, maybe you see these images in the media, in the Congress in Brasilia, the capital of Brazil, and they are present, they are there, and actually there is actually a constitutional amendment that they're trying to get passed right now, and this is the movement trying to help not to have this passed, because they want to change very fast what has been built after a lot of work that in such a scenario. So anyway, we have still a few programs of revitalization, and some programs have had positive impact in collaborative documentation, changing attitude towards language, strengthening bonds between generations, empowering native young researchers, rising of generation of native filmmakers, because we have documentation trying to get the members of the indigenous groups to participate actively, coupled with the higher learning education programs that we had. So these people, we have a splendid generation, even of filmmakers getting prizes and everything. And also bilingual education, despite of all the problems. Anyway, we had a system of bilingual education functioning. And we are trying also in the Kaingang language in the south of Brazil to have a program, a language and arts program inspired in the Maori programs, trying to get, this was the strategy of all these groups, to get alliances, to look for people who can actually help them. And now some people are looking at the Maori people, and the Maori people also would like to do something beyond what they have done in terms of the language and arts program. So there's an agreement now made. And anyway, the higher learning programs, they were possible because of alliance of the Ministry of Education that created this ProLin program that financed in the past 20 years the specific higher learning education throughout Brazil. Ford Foundation helped too with scholarships that enabled people to become, to go to the universities at an undergraduate and graduate level. UNESCO has been helping a lot, also in documentation programs and also in the higher learning programs. Lots of universities, virtually all the federal universities in Brazil have now a higher learning education program in the state they are. Also the grassroots, these are all indigenous organizations which also have been very active and working in tandem, in cooperation. And also the museums, the Indigenous Museum, the State Foundation, and the Indigenous State Foundation. So we have now programs working in all the states in Brazil. Also, we are just organizing these materials on, we're trying to have a survey on the language education revitalization program. I have the link here, then you can, this is going to be on very soon. And very fast, this Kaingang Language and Nature Nest proposed an intercultural dialogue between the Kaingang, is one of the largest groups of indigenous people in Brazil, in the south of Brazil, São Paulo, Rio Grande do Sul, Paraná. And the idea is that this project involved the translation and adaptation to the Kaingang of some of the principles that have worked in New Zealand for the revitalization of the Maori language. So we have a Kaingang linguist that was through these programs that I've mentioned to you here, and she'll be here for the second semester. She'll be in New Zealand through Massey University, and she's going to visit the Language and Nest in several places, and also the University of Otaki, which prepares the teachers for the Language and Nest. And so it's the Kaingang, basically. And some pictures here. There was a meeting, and some Maori teachers from New Zealand came. They met with the Kaingang, and they got organized in terms of preparing this language and nest. There's a Maori teacher from the Maori Institute at Massey University, and made some activities with Kaingang children. And this is a Mana Tamariki language and nest in Palmerston North, New Zealand. And also one of the principals of this has been there too. And now this is the place in the Kaingang area where they're gonna be this first language and nest. And this is Marcia, and this is a Maori woman in the Maori Institute at Massey University, also in the language and nest. Mari is her name, and this is Marcia Kaingang, that's the traditional Hongi, and now this is one of the programs that we are working on. Thank you very much.